The opposition People's National Party is asking for the government of Jamaica to spend more to boost the economy. The opposition is urging the government to spend $21.5 billion more to accelerate economic growth. Julian Robinson, who is the opposition spokesperson on finance, has mentioned that the additional expenditure of $21.5 billion would be approximately 1% of Jamaica's gross domestic product. The government is currently planning to spend $830.78 billion to finance the affairs of Jamaica in the 2021 to 2022 financial year. Robinson has mentioned that the additional amount of $21.5 billion can be accommodated by the government. He says this amount can be funded if we relax our fiscal rules and look at our primary balance and look at reducing that primary balance. The opposition spokesperson noted that the budget, as laid out, seeks to achieve a real gross domestic product growth of 5.2%. However, he is emphasizing that the growth will have to come from the domestic markets and says spending more would accelerate that pace of growth. According to his proposal, he says that $5 billion should be allocated to provide support to individuals and households. Another $5 billion should be allocated to provide support to micro and small businesses, while another $3 billion should go towards supporting farmers. He says that $3.2 billion should go towards internet access services. Island-wide digital literacy programs should have an amount of $1 billion, while renewable energy and energy efficiency programs for households should have an allocated amount of $2.3 billion. Incentive pay to healthcare workers should amount to $1 billion, while $1 billion should go to expanding hospital bed access for pandemic-related patients. Mr. Robinson has mentioned that Jamaica is spending far less than other Caribbean countries and will have to find ways to mitigate the impending problems that may present themselves as a result of them not spending more. He says that if you were to take a look at other countries across the world, while they continue to respond to this crisis, many of them are running deficits. He says that they are not doing this because they want to be irresponsible, but because of the scale and severity of the pandemic. Julian Robinson is basically asking for the government to be bold and to invest an additional $25 billion in persons. He also said that they need to increase the proposed budget by 1% of the country's gross domestic product, or add $21.5 billion. He says that the Jamaican economy will grow faster if there is greater spending. Clark did not make a growth prediction in his contribution to the budget debate on Tuesday, but he also mentioned that the Planning Institute of Jamaica has projected that the local economy will contract by approximately 12% by the end of the current fiscal year. Robinson is insisting, however, that the current budget was seeking ambitiously to achieve real GDP growth of 5.2% in the new fiscal year. He said that while there will be growth because the country's economic base has fallen so much over the past year, the economy would only grow fast enough if the government increased their domestic spending. He says that the growth will not be externally driven. He has also suggested that if the government adds another 1% of GDP in expenditure to the current budget of $831 billion, which amounts to approximately $21.5 billion, it would make economic growth easier and swifter. Robinson has mentioned that the added funds could be accumulated by reducing the country's primary surplus balance from the current projection of 6.1% to 5.1%. Although he said that this could require a further relaxation of the financial rules. Supporting his proposal, he said that if there is ever a time to do this, it is now, given the current economic impact that the pandemic has had across the globe. Now is the time to be bold. It makes more sense to invest in our people now and reap the benefits later. He said that the lessons that are coming out from country experiences with economic crises is that in order to grow, governments have to spend more. Economic growth expands our revenue base, which allows us to contribute more from growth towards our financial needs. Robinson listed some areas to which he would like to have the $21.5 billion allocated. These areas include internet access, agriculture, incentive pay for healthcare workers, renewable energy, digital literacy, and businesses across the island. He has also mentioned that he recognizes that overcoming the pandemic crisis was not a sole task for the government. This is not a job that private sector can do alone either. While vaccines promise some hope, there is no magic treatment that can wish away the impacts of this pandemic. Road to recovery requires the collective will of all Jamaicans. For the sake of every Jamaican, we need to act now. We need to support more individual efforts. We need to support our businesses to keep our shutters open and save jobs. Let us roll out our island-wide broadband program without delay and build houses that the majority of Jamaicans can afford. Robinson also drew attention to increases in the prices of basic food since 2016 and pointed to a recent United Nations International Children's Emergency Fund and Caribbean Policy Research Institute's study, which indicates that 45% of households have had to cut back on food because they cannot afford it. He says that most households coped with food shortages by eating smaller meals or eating fewer meals per day. It doesn't help our situation that since 2016, the cost of basic food items has skyrocketed. The cost of salt fish, cooking oil, chicken, rice, for instance, have all increased over 100%. Food poverty has increased. It was also mentioned that even more serious was that there is an expectation that food prices will increase further in the coming weeks based on pronouncements from the president of the Jamaica Manufacturers and Exporters Association. The estimates being debated total $850.8 billion, including $272 billion in public debt payments and $239 billion for wages and salaries in the public sector, as well as $54 billion in capital expenditures. It comes in the wake of a $74 billion loss in government gross revenues, primarily due to the effect of the pandemic. Like, comment, share, and subscribe. Do you agree with the suggestions that are being made by the opposition in the form of Julian Robinson, who is the spokesperson on finance? Thanks for watching. Goodbye.